Lots of primaries today, as you well know, but we're kind of obsessed with Iowa and California. Reports from both states and your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, with a viewer's guide. How much security is too much? Is the White House becoming a kind of fortress? And if so, what does that mean for a democracy about to celebrate 250 years of freedom and dissent? Artificial intelligence, it's a big topic here. We wonder a lot about its effect on jobs. New data suggests remote work has been a bigger threat, and we look at the numbers. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout, Iowa. Let's talk about Iowa. Yes, there's news today. We will get to that in due course. The Iran war, there's still a ceasefire, but not much else going on. The weaponization fund, still dead. It's just a matter of burial that's to be determined. Oh, and today, a guy in charge of federal housing loans was appointed to be the new director, temporarily, of national intelligence. A declaration, if there ever was one, that directorship of that forlorn intelligence bureaucracy can be filled by literally anyone. But Iowa commands our attention. We simply haven't given it enough. We've been too consumed with Texas, California, Louisiana, Kentucky, nationwide redistricting. But I'm telling you, listen to me. If you want to understand the vast changes in American politics since 2008, changes that led us to the Trump era, you must study Iowa. Here's the Iowa county map in 2008, when Democrat Barack Obama won the state 54% to 44% over Republican John McCain on his way to the White House. This election was the last time a Democrat won a majority of Iowa's 99 counties. Now, please pay close attention to the 10 easternmost counties hugging the Mississippi River. There they are, in various shades of blue. Now, watch those counties as the map reflects these subsequent presidential elections. Obama's slightly narrow re-election in 2012, Trump's 10-point Iowa victory in 2016, Trump's 8-point victory there in 2020, and Trump's most recent 13-point victory in 2024. Those 10 counties not only reflect the statewide trend in Iowa, they mirror a national tide of rural and semi-rural America moving from blue to red, and with increasing Trumping in velocity and volume the longer Trump has been on the national stage. Consider. In 2008, Obama won those 10 easternmost counties by an average of 17 points. In 2024, just 16 years later, Trump won those same 10 easternmost Iowa counties by an average of 23 points. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a 40-point swing. If Iowa Democrats have any chance of winning races for governor and Senate, interestingly, both of those are open seat races for the first time since 1968. Or if they hope to dilute the GOP's lock on all 4 Iowa congressional seats, they must reverse this title shift. To help us understand the dynamics of today's primaries in Iowa, let's bring in Amanda Rooker, the chief political reporter for KCCI, which is the CBS station in Des Moines. Amanda, take it away.
Major, great to be with you. And just looking at those graphics is striking. I think it tells the story of why Iowa is so nationally significant this year. In part, these elections will tell us whether or not Trump's hold on Iowa, remains to be seen as we look to the general election. Tonight, Iowans on the Republican and Democratic side are going to make their voice heard on what the future of the party looks like. Democrats, how do they win back power in Iowa? What type of Democrat is it going to take to win here? Republicans, do they want to continue the status quo or do they want transformational change?
And talk to us about the governor's race.
Yeah, Major, as you said, we haven't seen a wide open governor's race in a while here in Iowa. On the Democratic side, State Auditor Rob Sand is running unopposed. He will be who Republicans take on in November. And even though Republicans have such an advantage in voter registration numbers, Rob Sand is seen as a strong candidate. He has name recognition. He has a huge fundraising advantage. So Republicans tonight are trying to pick who is the strongest candidate to beat Rob Sand. Now, they have a crowded primary field. Congressman Randy Feenstra entered the race as the Republican who everyone thought would sail to victory easily, but he has not consolidated a lot of support. Grassroots Republicans here remain frustrated that Feenstra hasn't been on the trail enough. Zach Lane actually has been kind of surging over the past few days. However, Donald Trump, the president, weighed in at the 11th hour and threw his support behind Feenstra tonight. We'll be watching if that was enough to send Feenstra over the edge. An important note, in Iowa, one of those candidates has to win at least 35% of the vote in order to win outright. Otherwise, party delegates will select the Republican nominee for governor.
Republican Joni Ernst is not seeking re-election as a U.S. senator, so that's an open seat. Explain that dynamics of that race.
Major, that's arguably one of the most nationally significant races in Iowa tonight. Republicans will be choosing between Ashley Hinson and Jim Carlin. Ashley Hinson is seen as the presumptive winner of that race. We'll see. On the Democratic side, a hotly contested race between Josh Turek and Zach Walz, two Democratic state lawmakers and two young male candidates who are largely running on similar issues: anti-corruption, anti-corporate influence. However, Zach Walz is kind of seen as the more progressive candidate. Josh Turek is seen as a candidate making the case that he can win over more independent, more moderate voters. So it's the question, who do Iowa Democrats think, what type of candidate do they think will be able to win a statewide race and flip a seat? Democrats haven't won a Senate seat since 2008 in Iowa, so the choice they make tonight will be significant.
Amanda Rooker, KCCI in Des Moines, thank you very, very much. CBS News investigative correspondent Julie Watts joins me now from California. Voters there are at the polls for the state's governor's race, as well as Los Angeles mayoral contest and some House races under redrawn maps. Let's begin with the LA mayor's race. Walk us through Spencer Pratt, his campaign, and whether or not that's going to be a viral moment or a viral moment and an electoral moment.
Well, I wish I could tell you for certain. People who thought that Pratt's character on the Hills was entertaining are now riveted by Pratt as a political candidate. His AI campaign ads, they're controversial, they're cinematic, and in many cases, they're free. Major supporters across the country are flooding social media with viral pro-Pratt content. But the real question is, how many of Pratt's fans are actually eligible to vote in LA? Prediction markets have current mayor Karen Bass and Pratt way out ahead, but polling has them neck and neck with city council member Nithya Raman, who was endorsed by Bernie Sanders, which goes a long way in deep blue LA. And, most of the ballots in California have not yet been turned in yet. Remember, we are a mail-in ballot state, so there's still a lot of time and a lot of questions out there.
How about the governor's race?
Oh, how about it? New York, the New Yorker aptly compared it to a lazy Susan cycling through frontrunners. So betting markets have Javier Becerra, Biden's former health secretary, out front, with Fox News commentator Steve Hilton in the second spot. Remember, we're a top two jungle primary, so it could be two Democrats or two Republicans. Recent polls show them both neck and neck, with billionaire climate activist Tom Steyer running as a Democrat. And so Hilton is now warning of a possible top two Democrat runoff. You may remember for a while they were concerned about two Republicans on top. So he is urging people not to vote for Republican Sheriff Chad Bianco, and even President Trump getting into the mix on Truth Social, urging Californians to vote for Hilton today. And then on the Democrat side, a lot of people publicly talking about struggling with the decision between voting their conscience, the person they really want to vote for, and voting for the person they think can win. Katie Porter is racking up editorial board endorsements. A lot of folks are fans of San Jose Matt Mayor's policies, but there really is still that lingering fear of a top two Republican runoff. It spooked a lot of Democrats.
And Julie, tell my audience how California tabulates. It takes a while, so it may be a while before we know 1 and 2 in all these closely watched races.
Yeah. So, under a new California law, it gives counties 13 days to count the ballots and then 30 to finalize the results. But keep in mind, I mentioned we're a mail-in ballot state, fewer than 20% returned. And I want to show you this. This is the full list of the 60 candidates for governor, which includes names like former frontrunner Eric Swalwell, who dropped out of the race, but it does not include people like popular Green Party candidate Butch Ware, who's running as a write-in candidate. There's a lot of chatter also about people trying to come to LA to illegally vote for Spencer Pratt, which could complicate ballot certification there. Honestly, there are so many potential plot twists here, Major, that even with those, that 13-day deadline, who knows how long it might take.
Well, we love plot twists around here, and I know you'll be there to capture each and every one of them for us. Julie Watts, thank you very much. I want to bring in your friend and mine, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, I promised a viewer's guide. Give us one.
Okay. So, as Julie mentioned, California's primary rules is a top 2 contest. The top 2 finishers tonight, or whenever the ballots get done being counted, move on to the general election. So what you've seen in the polling up until now is this is rough order here. These candidates, Hilton, Becerra, Steyer, all getting about 20 to 25% of the vote. If that doesn't sound like a lot, it's not. That's because a lot of the Democrats especially have had what we call a fractured field. They've been splitting that Democratic vote. Now, here's your viewer's guide tonight. Julie mentioned that California counts slowly and it has by mail. So what I see in the voter file right now is out of 8.5 million expected ballots, I see right now we've got 3.6 million of them have been returned. Now, the thing here to watch is a lot of them are Republican ballots. Now, you might expect that those votes would go to Hilton or Chad Bianco. Now, Republicans are 25% of the voters in the state, but the ballots in so far are 32% Republican in our analysis. As those ballots get counted, you might expect tonight that Hilton will do okay, maybe Bianco will do okay, those Republican ballots get counted. But Democrats, it seems like, have been hanging on to their ballots, maybe trying to make up their mind among all those Democratic candidates. So if they're just returning them now, returning them tonight, maybe later, those ballots, as they start to come in late in the night, maybe even into tomorrow, we'll see if the race shifts again. That's kind of your quick viewer's guide based on what we've already seen from the voter file, Major.
I spent a good deal of time talking about Iowa. Is there anything you're tracking in Iowa?
Yeah, well, look, Democrats want, I can't resist, Major. Democrats want Iowa to be their field of dreams this year. It's been hard, right? Now, here's the thing. You've got not only close potential for the House, but if I put up the Senate battlegrounds, we've got Iowa on that list. As you mentioned, it could be tough for Democrats, but at the same time, there's just numerically fewer voters that they have to flip there, as opposed to a much larger state like Texas. That's one of the reasons that Democrats think they might have a shot this year, and that's something to watch. You see the primary tonight, if that sets up, in fact, a competitive contest come the fall, if it can stay on that battleground list, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is testifying on Capitol Hill and just confirmed moments ago the Justice Department will not move forward with the so-called anti-weaponization fund. That declaration was met with skepticism from several congressional Democrats. Here was one of those exchanges.
The reasons for the fund is something that President Trump talked about for a long time, which is the fact that there were a lot of people in this country who had their government weaponized against them. The reasons for the fund, I think, it remain as important as they were before, but we are not moving forward with the fund.
Not moving forward ever.
Correct.
Not ever. Here with me now, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree. Tom, always great to have you here. Do you think this is the last word on the so-called anti-weaponization fund?
I think it is, at least in its current form. We just heard the Attorney General give what was a very definitive statement, that this fund is done. He said the statement under oath. He said it publicly. I think it would be very difficult for them to do a 180 on this. It's possible down the road, maybe they try to reconstitute a similar fund, but I think for all practical purposes, the current fund, as they currently want to implement it, is done.
This fund was part of a settlement that the Trump administration essentially executed in a lawsuit it brought against the government. Does that settlement in any way get altered by the disappearance of this so-called weaponization fund?
Well, in normal times, I would say yes. This was obviously a critical term in the settlement agreement. And again, in normal times, if you have a critical settlement term that gets blown up or withdrawn, the settlement as a whole changes. Maybe people reevaluate. Do they really want to settle? Does it undo the settlement? But these are not normal times. So you could see a universe in which the Justice Department and President Trump still move ahead with a settlement of sorts. Presumably, it would still contain the provision that drops the IRS investigations into President Trump, but the settlement agreement is shorn of this fund, which, in my judgment, was ill-advised from the get-go. So I'm thankful and glad that the Attorney General has finally put it to rest.
Is that settlement, the underlying one, about settling the lawsuit with the IRS because the president's tax returns were illegally leaked? That's a fact. He deserves relief from that. No, I don't think anyone disputes that. But there are lots of other Americans who deserve it as well. He's not the only one. But it has this stipulation. All existing audits for the president, his family, and associated companies disappear. Is that legally defensible?
Well, it's a tough one to defend in that it's obviously an extraordinary grant of relief to President Trump. And if you were the Justice Department, you would try to justify it by saying, look, we gave him this immunity from future IRS audits in exchange for him dropping his lawsuit against us for disclosing his tax returns. Now, is that a fair trade? Maybe not. And I think this is one of the issues that the federal judge in Florida, who is now going to kind of dust off the settlement and maybe take another look at it. She wants to hear from the parties. She's begun to sunk her teeth into this. And so my guess here, Major, is that she is going to ask that exact question you just asked. Is this a fair and just resolution of this controversy?
So fresh and inquiring judicial eyes. This matter is not over. Tom Dupree.
It ain't over.
Thank you so very much. We have Sam Vinograd here to talk about the new Director of National Intelligence appointed. But first, because it's a dynamic situation here at the Takeout, and we love our dynamism, Eleanor Watson here with some brand new, fresh reporting about an American pilot shot down not once, but twice in the Iran war. Ellie, what do we know?
That's right. If you remember the dramatic event where F-15 was shot down over central Iran, that downed pilot was previously shot down in an earlier incident in the war when 3 F-15s were downed by Kuwaiti friendly fire. That pilot just 30 days really after that Kuwaiti incident was back in the plane and shot down over Iran and rescued in that dramatic fashion that really was just a few days before the ceasefire and was kind of the dramatic event of the bombing campaign. And now we've learned that this is yet another layer to that event.
So flying is perilous. Everyone understands that. But this does seem to be a odds against odds reality.
We talked to former officials who said it's essentially like being hit by lightning twice. The officials said they haven't really seen an incident like this where a pilot was shot down twice during the same campaign since maybe as far back as the Vietnam War. Now, if you're another Air Force officer, you might think, oh no, I don't want to fly with this pilot. But what are the odds of getting hit by lightning 3 times?
Exactly. Extremely low. But they were low for that 1 to second time also. Ellie Watson, please stay here at the family table. As I mentioned before, President Trump today announced the temporary appointment of Bill Pulte as Director of National Intelligence. Pulte already has an administration job. He's the director of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, 2 government-backed mortgage suppliers. Pulte has no defense or intelligence experience. He has, however, clashed with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who, according to stories in Politico and the New York Times, threatened to punch Pulte in the face for trash-talking him to Trump. Pulte has also pushed flimsy mortgage investigations into Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff. This appointment can last 6 months. Here was the reaction from Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Mr. Pulte has absolutely no intelligence background. He has no national security background. The law was written to prevent this kind of appointment. What he does have is a record of manipulating public information, even as the housing czar, to try to pursue attacks against President Trump's enemies.
As mentioned before, Sam Vinograd right here. Sam, great to have you with us. You and I have had this conversation many times. Director of National Intelligence is an overlay bureaucracy born out of 9/11, but it has grown, but not grown in influence. And as I said in the open, if you can appoint Bill Pulte, you can appoint anyone.
Sure feels that way. When I read this, I actually thought it was a joke. And then when I realized that it was serious, I very quickly spoke with former colleagues, and we discussed the fact there's nothing funny about this.
No, there isn't. You're right.
The Director of National Intelligence serves a lot of different functions. The Director of National Intelligence is in charge of really overseeing 18 component parts of the U.S. intelligence community, ensuring that they are adapting and evolving to meet new threats, to integrate new technologies. The Director of National Intelligence is in charge of tens of thousands of people around the world who are not just collecting intelligence, but engaging in covert operations and also conducting really critical analysis that used to, I'm stressing the used to, drive decision-making by the president. Further, Major, the Director of National Intelligence is really the closest advisor to the president when it comes to intelligence. The DNI is supposed to brief the president every day in the president's daily brief, kick off National Security Council meetings, cabinet meetings, to provide the latest and greatest, the best analysis possible. I struggle to understand where Bill Pulte has qualifications for either of those key roles.
And he has another full-time job.
He sure does. And, you know, I've worked with, I think, 3 DNIs now. I can tell you, there are not enough hours in the day
to do that job,
to do the DNI job, even with a fully staffed intelligence community. We also have to keep in mind the DNI is overseeing an intelligence community that has really atrophied over the past year and a half. Many folks have left or been pushed out. There has been a reorganization under Tulsi Gabbard, getting rid of certain centers. Keep in mind, China and Russia, North Korea and Iran are not appointing individuals like Bill Pulte to run their intelligence communities. And so we are really at a disadvantage. And I really fear that best case scenario, it will take years to repair the damage done to the U.S. intelligence community.
And Ellie, feel free to jump in on this conversation, but I want to talk to Sam about recent events in Ukraine. On this network on Sunday on Face the Nation, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told Margaret Brennan, our colleague and moderator, he feared a massive Russian aerial attack. And in fact, it's happened in Kyiv and Dnipro and other parts. 22 people killed, 138 wounded. And Zelensky appealing for more anti-missile defenses and more help from the United States and Europe. Evaluate.
What I evaluate is it is a sad state of affairs when the president of Ukraine has to basically go on television and make these public pleas for air defense capabilities. It is a fact that the United States is running relatively low on the interceptors that Ukraine needs, not only because they have been so significantly used, and Ellie is expert on this, in the war against Iran, but military assistance for Ukraine has been diminished and under pressure under this administration, and Ukraine is in dire straits when it comes to the air defense capabilities that it needs, and Vladimir Putin is really exploiting that.
Ellie, the perspective from the Pentagon.
Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the president of Ukraine has said air defense and ammunition, that's what I need. And since the beginning, the Pentagon really created a Ukraine Defense Contact Group under the Biden administration to kind of get these materials to Ukraine. Since the Trump administration came in, they've reevaluated that. Now the Iran war has started, and there's looking to the future.
And taking precedent.
And looking to the future on what will the U.S. need in future fights. As Sam said, they've used a lot of these Patriot interceptors during the Iran conflict, and that's specifically what Ukrainian President Zelensky is asking for to defend the people of his country.
Very much on the mind of Ukrainians and Europe writ large. Sam Vinograd, Ellie Watson, great to have you with us. Thank you so very much. Still to come on the Takeout, Democratic voters in Maine tell CBS News what they think of Graham Plattner's sexting saga and his campaign against 4-term Republican Senator Susan Collins. Also, President Trump has said the ballroom he's building will be a super secure mini fortress with a drone port on the roof. Writing about increased acts of violence near the White House and intensifying security, Matt Beiser of The Atlantic compared the White House to the Green Zone in Iraq. He will join us. Plus, new research suggests strongly that for now, remote work has had more to do with a sour employment landscape for college grads than artificial intelligence. We take a look at all that. Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Maine Senate candidate, Democrat Graham Plattner, was on Capitol Hill meeting with Democratic lawmakers. Now, they always say these are pre-scheduled meetings, not a crisis or anything. It was on the schedule, but it does, interestingly, come on the heels of leaked sexually explicit text messages Plattner exchanged with women who are not his wife. Our Aaron Navarro spoke with Democratic voters in Maine, and here's a sample.
To a certain degree, I can separate what somebody's doing in their personal life and the mistakes or whatever that they've done from how they run politically.
I'll probably, grit my teeth and vote for him because, I'm a Democrat. But it just, to me, all the enthusiasm around him, again, I wish that the Democratic Party was, finding better candidates who didn't have these flaws.
I think the bar is set so low in Washington that somebody who shows up and just says, yeah, I did these things, or yes, this was me, or this is how I was, I've apologized, and I am taking accountability for those actions is amazing.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins me now from Capitol Hill. So, Nicole, summarize the day for Graham Plattner.
Well, we don't exactly know how it went because he didn't talk to reporters. You saw him there entering a building where he did meet with some Senate Democrats. He's also in town for a fundraiser. But look, those who are already in support of Plattner remain in support of Plattner. We did talk to Leader Chuck Schumer, who did say that he met with Plattner, although it appears that that meeting occurred separate from this other meeting this afternoon with Senate Democrats. But he really stayed on message when I asked him about Plattner's former Democratic primary rival, Janet Mills. Take a listen.
We're going to beat Susan Collins and take back the Senate. Any other subject you got? Any other subject? Yes, yes.
Do you believe that Janet Mills should unsuspend her campaign?
We're going to beat Susan Collins and take back the Senate.
So he made that statement about 4 or 5 different times. In fact, that entire press conference, and Major, you're pretty familiar with these availabilities that Senate leaders hold with reporters where they're asked about different news of day topics. But this particular press conference was strictly focused on the situation in Maine because, of course, Schumer had backed Janet Mills, who eventually did suspend her campaign, which is why I asked whether or not she should unsuspend it, because she has indicated to voters in Maine that she is still on the ballot. But as you heard the leader there say multiple times, he believes that they will focus on trying to beat Susan Collins this fall. So again, I think it still remains to be seen kind of how this will play out. Obviously, we know Maine's primary is next week, so we will see what voters have to say about this.
Nicole Killian, Capitol Hill, thank you so very much. Coming up, the White House Correspondents' Dinner has been rescheduled after a shooting disrupted the first one a couple of weeks ago. Just one example of serious, violent incidents surrounding the president and the White House complex writ large. More on that next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. I'll be hanging out here for a while, which I always love to do. Security at the White House tighter than ever since the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which this afternoon announced rescheduled for July 24th. It will be held at a different hotel and with intensified screening of guests. Now, the question of security in our nation's capital has really never gone away, but recently the push for perimeters has bumped up against the need for access into democracy. In a new article in The Atlantic, Matt Visor writes this about the White House complex, quote, "The 18-acre site is laced with fencing, sensors, jammers, cameras, armed guards, bunkers, drone interceptors, and surface-to-air missiles, all of which speak to how we now protect and isolate our leaders." Matt Visor joins me now. Matt, the provocative headline, "The White House is the new green zone." For those in my audience too young to remember what the green zone is, quick refresher.
Green zone, Iraq, around Baghdad, had sort of a secured complex that was protected, larger than the White House site, but still sort of a bubble. It was derisively named the bubble because
you were super protected in there, and it was dangerous to go out. And if you spent all your time inside of it, you kind of lost sight of how dangerous it was out there.
It gave you a false sense of tranquility inside. There's swimming pools, buffets, air conditioning. So you were disconnected from the what was happening beyond the border.
So talk about the White House now and what you see happening and what you fear it might be a harbinger of.
It's become increasingly fortified, and the perimeter can only extend out so far. There are businesses around, so the perimeter is about as far as you can get at the moment. but there are fences. You can't even approach the White House fence, which is now 13 feet. It was extended a couple years ago, but you can't approach that right now because of the construction and because of security concerns around the White House.
And there's the Lafayette Park right across north of the White House closed down for renovations, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be much access even when it reopens.
So it may reopen in the next month or so. The president wants it to, as part of his beautification of D.C., they want to reopen around July 4th. The Secret Service tells me, though, that they want to be able to quickly secure that site when needed. They've had bike locks and things up. They want to make that
bike racks
right. Kind of around. So they want to be able to quickly secure it. So there'll be some sort of gating system.
And speaking of the Secret Service, what have they told you about the threat environment now as compared to just, say, 2 or 3 years ago?
So they explained it to me that it had been linear increases over time. Now it's exponential. 40% more cases so far this year as compared to last year over a similar time period.
Of threats and actual events.
Yes. So their threat environment has increased in terms of what they're investigating and what they're looking into. And they're sort of looking for what root causes there may be in that. And they're trying to get it so it does not approach the White House gates. So they're trying to prevent people from getting close to the White House,
while also trying to allow people who live in this country, citizens of this country, or tourists from other countries to come see the citadel of our democracy.
Yeah. I mean, an image that,
it's the Capitol and it's the White House. Those are the two places.
And being able to walk past it, there are tourists all the time.
To behold it and take pictures and be there.
Or to protest.
Or to protest, exactly.
Out in front. And so right now, there's not the ability to do any of those things. So that may change when Lafayette Park is again reopened. There may be, you can get a little bit closer, but I think there's the potential that there's a fundamental shift right now in our country of how we treat security and our leaders.
I'm not going to be unfair to you and ask you in a minute to compress the entire history of security at the White House, but give us a sense of how it has evolved.
So I'll start quickly. 1801, Thomas Jefferson puts up a wooden fence, but it's to prohibit animals from getting in. People could roam around. It was extremely accessible, which seems far-fetched from where we are now. But usually there's been increasing security around global events. So the Oklahoma City bombing closed Pennsylvania Avenue to vehicles. And there were times after Pearl Harbor where they changed security around the White House. I think what's different here is that it's more of a domestic threat. It's not necessarily at war. I mean, we are at war with Iran, but that's not what's causing this. It's a domestic political violence is causing this latest shift.
So the threats that judges have talked about, lawmakers have talked about, are now present, not just for the president, but for the entire complex in which he and all the people associated with his administration work.
Right. And it's not just the president. As you mentioned, I mean, congressional threats are up. Governors are facing this. But the White House is like this fort at the moment, because of the president and the power that exists in that office.
Great piece. Matt Visor, The Atlantic. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the COVID pandemic made remote working the new normal for millions, maybe tens of millions of Americans. And it still exists in small amounts. New analysis shows that it may be hurting those entering the workforce. We will take a look at that next, right here at the Takeout. Welcome back. I told you I'd be hanging out in the conversation corner. Just switch chairs. See, it's super easy. New research from the Federal Reserve of New York finds that the biggest obstacle for recent college graduates to get a job and to move up is not artificial intelligence. It is remote work. Among the findings, the unemployment rate for younger college graduates from 2022 to 2025 was 3.7%, up 20% from before the pandemic. But older college grads were more likely to not only be employed, but stay employed. This report writes as follows. Our analysis suggests that these trends are related with remote work making it more difficult for managers to train and mentor new employees. New York Times investigative reporter Jodi Kantor joins me now to discuss all this. She is the author of the book we've talked about here before, How to Start Discovering Your Life's Work. Jodi, when we last talked, we were trying to figure out what the dimensions of either potential or harm were for college graduates as related to artificial intelligence. And this data from a very credible source suggests, wait a minute, let's look at something else. Remote work, evaluate.
Yeah, I've seen other evidence too showing that essentially it's too early to know what the impact of AI is on entry level work. There's conventional wisdom among college grads, their parents, that AI is already destroying entry level work. That could happen, but I'd say that's a giant. We do not know. There are other negative forces, though, impacting the entry level job market. We just know that employers are very slow to hire right now. They're reducing costs. And then this new research shows us that it may be that remote work has also had an impact, which I think is consistent with a theme we see, even if it's early to say that AI is doing this or that to the entry level job market. What we can say is that technology is reshaping relationships, including even in the hiring process for entry level workers. And that has been very tough. It's very disruptive, and many young people are finding it negative and demoralizing.
And Jody, I want to read to you from this study also, because it talks about the nexus between proximity to work colleagues and either advancement or even getting hired in the first place. Let me read. It's a long quote. Bear with me. When people work next to their colleagues, they receive more feedback on their output and more mentorship. When they are separated, even by a short distance, that feedback tapers off dramatically. The loss in feedback is more pronounced for younger workers who miss out on constructive comments that spur their development.
I mean, this is something, the research is really interesting, but this is also something intuitively that workers have known for years. What we've seen in the workplace, partially through COVID, but partially through the rise of technology, is a degradation in relationships. We see interactions that used to be mediated by human intelligence being mediated by computers, whether it's remote work in which you're kind of managed by algorithm and don't really know your boss, or whether it's an AI interview screening you for a job so that you are entering the workforce without really meeting anyone. It tends to leave younger workers very disadvantaged. But part of the way we gain and grow in the workplace is through these in person interactions. So, like this is a very personal debate. It's a very heated debate. So I wouldn't say no remote work ever, but I would say is if you're going to take a remote work job, how are you going to be sure that you're going to have real relationships and real learning?
And Jody, to the point of your book, How to Start, if you're a 40-year-old worker who has experience and a track record, you're more likely to maybe be hired for a remote job. But if you're just getting started, not only you need it as a getting started worker, but your employer needs you to have a better sense of interactivity in your own workplace.
Older people are more protected in remote work because they have experience and they have relationships. First time workers don't have that, and so they're vulnerable to all of the negative things about remote work.
Jody
I
Cantor.
would say,
Yeah, go ahead. Real
yeah,
quick.
no, if there are graduates out there who are lucky enough to be choosing a first job right now, what I would say is choose stimulation and choose relationships and work for the best people you can, because those first jobs are about learning and you probably will learn a lot more in person.
Not always about the best pay, but the best situation. Jody Cantor, great stuff as always. I appreciate it very much. Coming up, a warning for Republicans from former Vice President Mike Pence, our political panel. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Former Vice President Mike Pence again warning Republicans over what he calls populism taking over the party. On CBS Mornings, he urged a return to what he regards as traditional conservative values. Take a listen.
I still believe that the overwhelming majority of people that ever vote Republican, Republicans, independents, and many Democrats, do so because they're committed to a strong defense, to limited government, to traditional moral values. And I believe for the sake of our country, for the sake of our party, it's going to be imperative for the Republican Party to return to those principles.
Political panel time. Republican strategist making her Takeout debut, Jessica Anderson. Great to have you here, Jessica. Democratic strategist, Amisha Cross. Great to have you here. So let me start with you. You heard the vice president. That's not what he said in the first term, but he has become more and more willing to distance himself from the current trajectory of the Trumpian Republican Party. Evaluate that for us.
So I think what's going on here is a really unique conversation that's kind of limited to Washington, which is, what is the future of the Republican Party? Is it what the voters just decided in 2024, that it would be this working class populist agenda? Or is it going back to a more restrained, limited government? This Trump administration, I actually think, has done a little bit of both. And what Mike Pence, the former vice president, is doing is really putting down a marker to say, okay, we need to only have the limited government part of our party going forward. What's interesting to me, though, is that when I talk to voters across the country, that is not the breakdown.
That's not where they're at.
No, the breakdown really is still between left and right. It's red shirts versus blue shirts. And there is this urgent need amongst voters. We're in primaries today, Senate races, governor's races, the mayoral race in LA, California, of course. And you have this divide between the very common sense Republicans that just want a better deal for America. They want jobs. They want to cut taxes. They want to bring jobs home, close the border. And then extremist policies like we see from Graham Plattner and James Tallarico. And that is what I think is going to drive November, less of this what's what of the Republican Party, because voters already weighed in.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that. Number one, what she just said, what Jessica just said, and what you're looking for on the primary calendar tonight.
Well, I think she's partially correct. At this point, we do have a big schism between the parties themselves trying to decide what the next trajectory of them is going to be versus people on the ground who just really care about affordability. They could care less about the success of either party. I think that for the Republicans specifically right now, they have an issue with what their image is going to be post-Trump. 2028 is not forever away. Right. So they're trying to kind of, see what that lifestyle is going to be.
And Pence wants to be a part of that conversation, if even only fractionally.
No, absolutely. But I would argue that Trump has done anything but had limited government. This is a guy who is trying to influence how many kids women have. This is a guy who has pushed curriculum changes. This is a guy who cares about the books that are in schools. This is a guy who has expanded government more than anything else, at least tried to do it through government control of things that were typically done at the local level. Beyond that, I think that we have to really pay attention to what's happening, not only in these primaries, but also not reading too much into them for midterms, just because that is a different electorate that is going to show up for those midterms, but also because it's going to be a much more broad group of individuals.
Are you paying more attention to California tonight or Iowa?
Iowa.
Why?
Because I think that Iowa is going to give us a better shot. I think that California...
As Democrats.
Yeah, I think that Iowa is going to give a better shot. I think that California has a few nuances that are problematic. Obviously, there's still some anger around what just happened or what happened in the fallout after the fires. But also because I honestly think that there's just a bit of excitement that probably shouldn't be there around a wannabe and an AI influenced campaign. I'm sorry. I think that one's ridiculous.
Okay, Jessica, the Transportation Department said today that gas prices are up 42.5% from where they were 1 year ago this month. That can't be a happy prospect for Republicans on the midterm ballot.
Well, I definitely think Republicans are looking for solutions when it comes to gas prices still. And so I think we're all eager to see a deal in Iran come to completion.
Matter of fact, related to that, in Iowa, Ashley Hinson, who is likely to be the Senate nominee on the Republican side, in conversations with voters recorded, said, if this isn't over in a couple of weeks, it's going to be a political problem. She said it out loud.
I think that's great for her to say. Look, the reality is President Trump said something very similar about 4 weeks ago. He said gas prices are going to increase while we wait this out. The president and all Senate Republicans should be honest with the American people about the trade-offs. Putting this war front and center in Iran has a direct impact on our gas prices here in America. That is a trade-off that voters are going to have to wrestle with, and it's our job.
And if you don't explain the trade-off, you're probably hurting.
That's right. So I actually loved when the president came out and said that. He said about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Hinson did that yesterday. I think that's great. Let's be honest with voters and explain the trade-off.
Amisha, you get the last word.
Well, I don't think that voters are confused about the trade-off. It's a consequence of a war that the overwhelming majority of Americans, whether they live in red state, blue state, purple state, or anywhere in between, just don't agree with. They knew that, oil prices would go up, and they don't want to hear explanations as to why, based on this war that they didn't want to begin with. This is a president. No, Americans do not want this war. I don't know what polls you've been looking at, but Americans do not want this war.
They want to know why. They want to know.
No, they just want him to end it, and they want their gas prices.
We will continue this in the after show. I appreciate it both. Jessica Anderson and Misha Cross. You didn't even know there was an after show, did you? There is one. It goes on and on. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. You know what we are. We're relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Daily Report's coming up next.